Sombra. Depending on the person, this name carries different meanings. To some, she's a utility-based DPS. To others, she's a stealth-based assassin. To me, you ask? Well, she's all of these things. Sombra is Overwatch's identity crisis, so let's talk about it. So what do I mean when I say that she's Overwatch's identity crisis? Well, in order to fully explain that, first I'm going to have to give a bit of history on Sombra. So if you only started playing in Overwatch 2, maybe a little bit later in Overwatch 1, this will certainly be useful for you because you're going to have to see it. If you need therapy, and by that I mean you've been playing Overwatch since 2016, you're not really going to need this history because you're more than likely going to know it. However, I'd still appreciate it if you did anyway, because I'm not going to be talking about exclusively her big changes. I'm still mentioning a few of the smaller ones and things like that. But either way, you can skip ahead if you so please. But enough of that, let's talk Sombra. So, 2016, the first iteration of Sombra was released. Yes, first iteration, this girl is the most reworked character in Overwatch history. So starting with the things that have always stayed at her core design and can't really be afforded to go back to. Hack and EMP. Back when she first came out, these silenced you for 5 seconds, with Hack taking a fair bit longer to actually channel, and EMP being the reason that Lucio and Sombra players would be playing 4D chess. She also had a different passive back then, Opportunist, which let her see enemies below 50% HP through walls. Her two other basic abilities have always stayed with her, but we've seen them get changed so much over the years. The first version of Stealth, or Invis as I'll refer to it for the rest of this video, was an ability on a timer where Sombra would have nearly double her move speed. It ended early, or if she chose to, or if she took damage or used any ability other than Translocator. And speaking of Translocator, which I'm going to call TP for the rest of this video, when she was first released, this was actually on a timer as well. 15 seconds on launch, later increased to 20 seconds. I'll get into the design talk about this and her other iterations later, because first we've got a history lesson that we need to get through. She got a good few fairly large buffs after her initial release, such as Hack disabling more passives like Fire Jets or Genji Double Jump and Wall Climb, and EMP not being blocked by small objects, and even seeing health bars below 100% without actually having to damage the targets. But one change from this patch, combined with two others from a different one, completely altered how she played forever. Hacked health packs no longer gave Sombra ult charge if her or another ally used them. I'll get into this detail a little more later, as I want to mention another two changes she received, which were the nail in the metaphorical coffin to her old playstyle. Invis and TP having their durations completely removed and changed to last infinitely. While this wasn't a rework in the technical sense, I'd argue this was our first rework considering how big these changes were at the time. Invis now gave less move speed, and TP could actually be destroyed as well, but now they lasted forever, along with hacked health packs not really being something Sombra should dedicate herself towards anymore. And these three changes were a lot bigger than they seem on paper. She continued getting quality of life and general buffs over the years, with the occasional nerf to things like hack duration and such, so I don't need to be going over every single one of these, but there is just one that I do want to mention because I find it slightly funny. The final change that Sombra received in Overwatch 1 was a buff to her move speed during Invis up to 65%, and you'll see why I find this funny in a moment. Upon the arrival of Overwatch 2, we were introduced to a brand new Sombra, with this version being my personal favourite, but again, more on that later. So, what's new this time? Starting off, her gun and damage spread were nerfed, but thanks to her new passive, still called Opportunist, which gives her a 40% damage increase to hack targets. Hack got a load of number changes, like having the silence go down from 1 second from 5, the cooldown was cut in half, the health pack hack timer was half down to 30 seconds, and hacked enemies are now revealed through walls to Sombra's team. The Invis detection radius got increased, but in exchange, Sombra can now hack while Invis, which tank players certainly had opinions on. And finally, EMP now dealt 40% of the target's current HP, but no longer dealt additional damage based to shield health pools. Her TP remained the same, but now I want to mention how Invis move speed got nerfed, back down to 50% from 65. Why? Because the old DPS passive that gave bonus move speed on kill, which she would never get to use due to the nature of Invis. But anyway, I digress. She got some balance changes while this iteration was live. Things like hack getting changed from a 1 second lockout to 1.5, then down to 1.5. On the same patch as the 1.5 change, hacked enemies now couldn't be hacked for 8 seconds, and a multiplier for bonus damage was changed down to 25%, which were very nice changes to see. There were also more general buffs, like primary fire damage got an increase along with the health pack timer increase, but nothing like what we saw in Overwatch 1 until they reworked her again. Third tries the charm, right lads? So her old passive was removed and Invis became the new passive, which activates by existing for 3.5 seconds. Her move speed while Invis was reduced down to 45%, along with hack cast time being reduced with cancelling stealth. DP got changed to be automatic activation instead of manual, which also resets the cooldown of Invis. We've also got a new ability, Virus, a projectile that does damage over time to the first enemy it hits. Keeping an element of her previous passive, however, it deals damage faster on hacked targets. It also has 10 impact damage, but deals 20 on hacked impact damage, and dealt 100 damage over 4 seconds, or 2 seconds if they were hacked. And finally, EMP damage was reduced down to just 30% of their current HP. And for the last time, the general changes that she received were all things like number adjustments, like EMP dealing 25% damage in exchange for a 3-second lockout instead of 1.5. And that's the history of Sombra. But before I rewind and start talking about these older versions, first let's talk about her core design because good lord it's bizarre. Sombra has pretty much always had two core design principles in her kit which clash against each other. A utility-based DPS that shuts down the enemy, and a stealth-based assassin that brutally murders your backline. Obviously every single iteration of Sombra has both of these at least to a certain extent. Her utility is always there. Depending on the version, she's got her wall hacks, obviously she's got her regular hacks locking you out of your abilities, and she's even got a way to lock health packs away from the enemy to reduce any healing that they could potentially get. And then we've got her stealth-based assassinations, which has really come to the forefront, at least more recently, because, well, murder. We can take these two design principles and look at how they're featured in her kit in every single iteration, starting with her release, which I would say her release was definitely the most utility-based version. Back then, if you locked in Sombra, you would frequently hear questions like, are you a DPS or are you another healer Sombra? Anything of that kind of sort. Sometimes you'd even just flat out hear statements of people going, oh yeah, Sombra's just an extra healer. And it was all just because the best way for her to be getting ult charge was to just have someone like a tank snack on a mega health pack that she hacked. Some kind of assassin like I've been using throughout this video would not be how I would have described Sombra from back then. I only got to play with this original version of Sombra for roughly 6 odd months or so, and I was not good at the game at all, but I think the only thing I remember doing was walking around hacking health packs and healing off that. That was all I was doing, but that's a different story. She wasn't really the best assassin type of thing back then, considering how slow it was to get out of Invis, which gave you enough time to walk up to the backline and shout, "Ah, Zen, ¿cómo estás, coño?" before eventually actually getting out of it, and by the time you got out, you'd have a sleep dart in your arse, taking you out, and you would be dead before you even got a chance to deal half the Zen's health bar to him. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you do get what I'm saying. The health pack ult charge change was certainly the first step in changing how this dynamic worked, but even before she got to the permanent invis, there were a good few quality of life buffs that she received, which pretty much let her go from taking forever to get out of invis and actually start doing things, to speeding it up quite a bit in just a nice way, so pretty much the only thing she had time to say before she got out of invis was "Hola coño," and then she would start murdering you. I would also like to apologize to any Spanish speaker who has had to hear this video so far, but yeah, we're fine. These changes were the first time that Sombra really started to lose out on her utility side. Obviously, Sombra will always have amazing utility. Locking someone out of their abilities, whether it's for 5 seconds or 1.5 seconds, is always going to be immensely useful no matter the situation, but also consider the fact that most of us play stuff like quick play, solo queue competitive. We do not have the coordination to be ganging up on these single targets who Sombra's hacking, especially when the window is as short as it is nowadays. People barely have the coordination to get in VC together. The thing with Sombra, as someone with more of an outside perspective on her Overwatch 1 versions, is that players weren't attracted to this half and half playstyle. Having someone with solid utility, but not being entirely focused on it, and having some decent damage and pick potential, but again, not being focused on it. If you wanted damage and pick potential, Widow, Hanzo, or Tracer were right there. Tracer especially so, as she was frequently compared to Sombra, considering the two of them do play very similarly, at least when it comes to wanting to be on the flank a lot, ruining the support's day. And if utility was what you wanted, well, if you had to fill a DPS slot, just look at Mei. She's certainly not doing numbers in terms of damage, but her wall to isolate targets along with the freeze to slow and easily kill them, not only is it a lot easier for players to gang up on an individual, especially when there's a Mei on their team, since they immediately see a Reinhardt who's locked away from his own, but her CC is arguably more useful in Sombra's than some cases. Would you rather fight a Reinhardt who can't use shield but still run and swing, or a Reinhardt quite literally incapable of moving? And on the note of utility, well, if that's really what you wanted, why didn't you just play support? Keep in mind, this is obviously before role lock existed, which is where a lot of this logic ends up coming from. But as always, a jack of all trades, master of none does attract a few players. I know a good amount of people, both high and low rank, casual and competitive, who absolutely loved Overwatch 1 Sombra's playstyle. Some say that they preferred when she would get all charge off of health packs. Others say that they actually just preferred how she would play when she had that infinite invis. But they always say how they loved how she could always be useful to her team, no matter the situation and nearly no matter the team comp in question. Come Overwatch 2 and, well, this narrative changes quite a bit. So Overwatch 2 Sombra, the first iteration that we got during this game, well, she's had her fair share of problems. Now, to be fair, I do think Blizzard did a pretty good job with some of the changes they gave her, especially the one where you can't hack the same target after 8 seconds. That was a saving grace for tank players. Like back when Overwatch 2 first came out, whether we were talking the beta or when the game officially released, a frequent strategy you'd be seeing Sombras do was sit in the back line, hack the tank, and just keep on repeating this cycle. Just hack, 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 just making them lose their mind because all they would do is temporarily disable their abilities for just a moment, and that would be enough to at least feck them over given the right circumstances. It was so annoying. And this kind of playstyle wasn't what the old Sombra players wanted or liked. For lack of better words, she was much closer to her Tracer side than her Mei side, but she was used for her Mei side, which just annoyed people, as no one liked this. But honestly, I have to say, this version of Sombra is my personal favourite. Now, when I say my personal favourite, I do specifically mean that I liked playing her like a bit of a weirder Tracer, just hanging around the backline. I loved the Discord orb that she had on hack. I found it made her incredibly engaging, and you could act as that lone wolf playstyle, that stealth assassin, but you could still be useful to your team in certain cases, especially thanks to EMP and all that. I think this was the best one, but I will be the first to admit that this was definitely the most frustrating Sombra to deal with. And it all came back to infinite stealth and infinite TP. She'd hack you before you could even react to it. 9 times out of 10 you die. Say if you didn't die, well, if you got her low, she's just going to immediately TP out to safety and there was nothing you could do about it. Especially so because of how much the CC that used to exist in Overwatch 1 was just nuked out of Overwatch 2. This version of Sombra was no one's Sombra. I know I'm certainly in the minority for saying that this version of Sombra was my favorite, especially given the topic of this video, but I just really loved that old hack damage boost. It did aim at giving her more of her Tracer side, but realistically, it just nearly completely failed at doing that at all. Players were just using her for the utility that she brought, but the utility in question was just tilting the enemy tank off the face of the planet, or if you were anything like me, tilting one of the enemy supports or DPS off the face of the planet because you would just spawn camp them for 5 minutes. And this brings us to the most recent version of Sombra, which I simultaneously really enjoy, but also really don't. I'm just not used to Virus yet, so I think it's just a skill issue. This rework aimed to lower how much Sombra goes for her lone wolf playstyle of just hack pack, place TP, annoy someone, TP back and repeat, while still keeping it intact at least a little bit and letting her play more with her team. Now, I've asked the same Sombra players as I mentioned earlier about their thoughts on this, and the reviews have been mixed, but it's all generally the same. They liked her utility, not her being a DPS. But if I may, I think it's wishful thinking to act like Overwatch 1 Sombra's style of gameplay could function in Overwatch 2, and it's all thanks to damage. She is a DPS, she needs to do damage. But the thing with Sombra that Questron put infinitely better than me, and I will link the video that he made on this in the comments, is that Sombra, well, she's just flawed, isn't she? And it all comes back to one aspect in her kit. Not hack, not even translocator. It's all invis. Being able to wait around for the best chance to lie, wait, and fucking appear out of the shadows to perfectly kill someone at the worst time for them, well, what do you do against it? The frustration that this brings is the reason why we get stuff like Sombra having a 39% win rate. Like I just said, I do think it's wishful thinking to act like Overwatch 1 Sombra could work in Overwatch 2, but I won't act like she couldn't. I think a case can certainly be made for a more utility-focused style to come back, but there is a problem with that. What, you may ask? Well, where should the utility lie? If we use Mei as an example, Freeze got removed from her primary fire, but the slow is still intact and even stronger than it used to be along with her wall. She still has the same general playstyle that does focus on being a more utility-based DPS for her team, helping them secure a pick by locking away a target. In Sombra's case, if you give the health pack ult charge back, well, would that really help her? Okay, fine, what if we focus on hack then? Maybe the lockout duration can increase in exchange for it being longer to hack someone. Well sure, it could work, but then you've got the outrage of players to deal with since they don't feel like they've got counterplay, especially if she's going to be hacking while invis. Maybe we return to the old style of invis and then implement this type of change. It certainly could work, but I don't know if that would fix the problem that people have with her. As unfortunate as it is, it's really hard to keep Sombra's hybrid playstyle alive and well. Personally, I do think bringing her down the team-orientated tracer type of path might be the way to go, but I can completely understand if this is not something that you want, or if this is something that shouldn't even happen to begin with. I'm not a Sombra player. I enjoy her a little bit, but she's never really been my perfect character. So I'm certainly not going to sit here and act like I have a solution, or act like I can even come up with one to begin with. The thought that Sombra doesn't really have a definitive playstyle and that she's not really like any of the other Overwatch heroes popped into my head, and I thought I could make a really interesting video out of it. But as I was making this video, I began to realize the fact she doesn't have a definitive playstyle is her identity, as fecked up as that sounds. Most Overwatch characters are like Russian ballerinas. They can do one thing, but they can do that one thing damn well. Now, obviously, once you get to higher ranks and you start getting more familiar with your character, you can experiment with different ways of playing them. Like, I played Pharah like a crackhead before she got rebirthed. I was diving Widows and Cassidys like a maniac. That's not how most people would play her. You'd be sitting down spamming a choke, but I digress. The fact that Sombra was nearly like a Swiss Army knife, although realistically, I'd say she's more of a spork. Like, yeah, you do the job of a spoon and a fork, but sometimes I just really need the fork, okay? Either way, I do think it's interesting how she's got these diverging playstyles, but all I can do is hope that she doesn't get put on the Blizzard chopping block once again, and if she is, that she's actually looked at critically for what could be causing players issues, stealth, instead of just getting a shiteload of number nerfs, because that does not help anyone. And there we have it. Sombra players, please let me know if I actually said something idiotic about your character. Like I said, I'm not a Sombra player, but I do enjoy her at least a little, so I wanted to go out and make this, because I think it's an interesting topic either way. And also, tell me yourself, even if you're not a Sombra player, let me know, what are your thoughts on Sombra? Do you think they could do anything to help Sombra out? What do you think the story might be? And sure, look, even if you have no opinion on Sombra, I'd greatly appreciate any feedback on this video at all. I'm not used to making stuff like this, but I did have a really good time writing out the script and making ahead with it, so if you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate any and all feedback. But for now, if you're still here, sure look, drop a like, sub, all that YouTube stuff, and I'll talk to you next time, lads.